Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Happy Monday. This is the GreenSpot Conversations webinar series. We are glad that you're able to join us, and we have excellent speakers today to talk about a great topic. But before we do that, I want to let you know about GreenSpot and our GreenSpot Conversation series. It's a series that was created by our GreenSpot Advisory Board to really touch on all aspects of sustainability in the community, both in terms of businesses and households. And we've done about a dozen of them so far. You can check them out on our GreenSpot website, which is www.columbusgreenspot.org. We will also have this webinar up on our website as well afterwards. If you're not a member, I encourage you to join GreenSpot. It is free to join for households, for businesses and organizations and community groups. You can find out more information on that at columbusgreenspot.org, and it is free to join. And you get a heads up on these really cool conversations before we make the announcements to the public. So with that, we're going to jump right in here. And if you're not familiar with GreenSpot, it is a program the city started to encourage folks to go green at home, both businesses, households, community groups, organizations, and now neighborhoods. And the way we view sustainability here at the city is really looking at three pillars or three parts of the triangle. So you have the economy, you have the environment, and you have equity or people. That's when you really have sustainability, and that's really when we thrive as a community, as a city. And that's what our goal is, not just to sustain, but to really grow and really thrive environmentally speaking, in terms of as well as the economy and equity. So GreenSpot, you can kind of see where it fits in with Mayor Ginther's Sustainable Agenda 2030, some of the vision, strategies, and goals. I'm not going to read all those, but you kind of see where they are. All right, so what is GreenSpot? I've already kind of covered that, but you can see GreenSpot by the numbers there. We have a number of household members, businesses, community groups, even neighborhoods have joined us. And we really look at those 5 areas of sustainability: the inform and engage, conserve water, conserve energy, reducing waste, and green transportation. And you choose from an option, menu of options to go green. And here's some of the savings that our members have seen in our GreenSpot universe. These are on the low end. These are what's being reported. We know that our members are, as much as I'd like to think they're logging in every single day into their e-dashboard and recording their activities, we know that's probably not the case, but there are significant savings even with the ones that are reporting. Okay, so we are jumping into today's topic, which is the benefits of telework policies. We have 2 great guests here today. Lexi Petrella is the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission's Mobility Coordinator. She is responsible for the Mobility Management Program, maximizing use of alternative modes of transportation to decrease isolation and improve quality of life for older adults, people with disabilities, and people with low incomes. So Lexi's work also supports transportation demand management through stakeholder partnerships and outreach strategies to help ensure the success of sustainable mobility initiatives and maximize alternative transportation use in the Central Ohio region. She previously served as a transportation planner for VN Engineers, where she studied crash data and field analysis to make design recommendations to multimodal facilities that improve the safety and livability for Connecticut road users. She graduated from The Ohio State University with a degree in city and regional planning in 2017, and is currently a current master's in public administrative candidate. So congratulations on that, and welcome, Lexi. Our next speaker will be Matthew Griffin. He is our other guest, and I appreciate him being here as well. He is the Sustainability Institute's program coordinator at The Ohio State University and the Sustainability Initiatives program coordinator of the Sustainability Education and Learning. So in this role, he facilitates experimental learning opportunities for students by collaborating with faculty and staff across campus. He also works to use campus as a living lab for sustainable learning by leveraging Ohio State's resources and expertise. Matthew serves as the academic co-lead for the Sustains Learning community, developing curriculum around sustainability education and facilitating events throughout the academic year. He received a bachelor's degree in sustainability and business from The Ohio State University in spring 2019, and he's excited to start his professional career with the Sustainability Institute. So welcome, Matt. I appreciate both of you all for being here. I know you're extremely busy, so we're really appreciative of your time. And Lexi, I'm going to turn it over to you and to talk a little bit about telework policies. What are they? Are they a new thing? Are they an old thing? Are there benefits to it? All sorts of questions that I know you have the answers to.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. And I feel like with Matt and I here both repping OSU in our bios, we have to start off with Go Bucks. I think that's pretty awesome. But I'm really happy that you asked me to be here today. So we're looking at the cover of our Employer Telework Policy Guide. And this is something that MORPC actually designed back in I believe we finished this in 2020, in early 2020. Am I correct, Dave? Does that sound about right?
I believe so. And actually, I'm going to pull up this is a screenshot of the guide. I have the actual guide. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that here on the screen in a second.
That sounds great. But we actually pursued this in 2020, but telework policy guides are not new. Telework policy isn't new. It's something that's been around for a long time. But obviously it was amplified during the COVID-19 pandemic, and MORPC decided to pursue this for a few reasons. First, MORPC is an organization that is really interested in sustainable mobility. We are the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Central Ohio, and through our work, we hope to support access and awareness of sustainable modes, including walking, biking, taking transit, carpooling, van pooling, to first improve access to jobs and community resources, but then also to improve our air quality and reduce the use on our infrastructure for costly road improvements. So this is something we've been interested in for a long time. We actually have a program called Go Ohio Commute, and that can be found at gohiocommute.com, that seeks to help our transportation users find sustainable routes to and from work. And we also have gamification and a point system and things to help individuals understand their impact. So their total CO2 emissions reduce based on their log trips, the money that they're saving from choosing an alternative mode, and so on. But when we saw the growth in telework and people working from home because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we wanted to pursue this because we wanted to first give business leaders and managers something to reference for how to adjust to the serious change that is working from home and that transition, but also to harness the increase in people working from home based on the sustainability impact. So I have some information here that I'm going to have to read off the screen. But in 2018, transportation accounted for 38% of greenhouse gas emissions in the city of Columbus. 77% of those emissions are from personal vehicles and not from freight or trucking. And so we see a lot of potential there in making an impact on sustainability from reducing personal vehicle use or single occupancy vehicle transportation. So for instance, if 1/3 of the approximately 500,000 employees in Central Ohio decided to telework or telecommute 2 days a week instead of driving a 20-mile commute to and from their home, emissions would be reduced to the equivalent of carbon stored by 155,000 acres of forests in 1 year, which is huge. And that's just an image we give to try to show how substantial telework can be for our sustainability impact. So we did partner with Columbus GreenSpot and Smart Columbus on the completion of this, and there was a lot of work, a lot of research of what different telework policies exist. We looked at the Denver NPO, we looked at different states and businesses, what they already have implemented, and we also referenced the state telework policy that was passed in 2016 to develop this. And we also surveyed a lot of people and employers and employees to understand what they need assistance on and if they're working from home or not based on the pandemic. So now we can just kind of look at the plan itself and walk through it a little bit. And if you could just scroll to the next page, if you don't mind, Dave. So here with the table of contents provides just a glance of what's in here. I'm not going to give a full description of this plan, because you all have are able to look this up on our MORPC website. But we do have an executive summary of what we're talking about and our findings. We talk about Go Ohio Commute, which is our main program of encouraging sustainable community behavior, which includes teleworking. That's actually a mode that you can log on the platform to see your impact. And we show the benefits of telework that I believe Dave will be speaking about shortly. Some of these are organizational, economic impacts, so saving in overhead or operational costs from maintenance in or rent in office space. And then also quality of life impacts for employees and giving individuals the opportunity to have better work-life balance. And then we also provide challenges of telework. There are a lot of challenges, but we provide points for how to confront that from a management level. Most importantly, we provide tools for creating a successful telework program. And for us, that really means, one, communicating with your staff. Telework doesn't work best for everybody, and it may come in different shapes and sizes for different staff members based on what they do, the teams that they work on, the partners that they have, and how they serve your clients or the community. And then we also have an agreement that managers can have between them and their employees to kind of provide documentation of that communication, that it has happened and everyone's in the know of what's expected of them. But then also a policy that kind of drives all that communication and that agreement from a management HR level. So all of these things are really important. And then at the end of the document, we do have an appendix that kind of talks about the methodology for providing the sustainability facts that we have included. For instance, the ones that I just brought up, that was developed by Dr. Brooke White, our sustainability program manager, and she did facilitate the other calculations included in the appendix. So it's a lot of really great information. However, I don't personally think this is the end-all be-all guidance for employers, because we have been working from home for so long now. We've been learning a lot. And something that we're thinking about as an agency and as an organization that helps work with our communities and our employers are what did we fall short on in this telework document, and what could we expand on? And something that we're thinking about here are disparities. So I actually had the pleasure of being on a panel with Dr. Courtney McClooney from Cornell University. I hope I'm saying her name right. And it was really impactful to me because she brought up a lot of unintended consequences of telework that are experienced by individuals of different backgrounds and ethnicities. And it's something that we really need to consider, especially at the management level. So what are some things that she talked about that we're trying to respond to? First is the comfort and the participation of all employees based on racial, gender, socioeconomic trends, things that we need to consider to make everyone feel comfortable and represented in the workplace. So for instance, work-life balance, is it beneficial for everybody with telework? And I don't think that's true. A lot of people don't think that's true. It really only benefits those that can have a traditional 9-to-5 workday, and that means a lot of middle class and upper class employees. So we need to make sure we're thinking about all staff members when we're talking about the benefits of telework. And what can we do to confront this? And really that just goes back to communication, making sure we're understanding which staff might need a little more flexibility in their schedule. And that could be because they're taking care of other individuals in their family or loved ones during hard times, especially related to the pandemic, and creating a safe virtual space for them to engage with other staff members or external partners. So something that we've talked about are the emotions that maybe come with having your camera on and having your home in the background, and what you might worry about that says something about you based on your race or socioeconomic status. And we don't want our staff to feel limited or uncomfortable in having their camera on. So some things that management can do is maybe having a standard virtual meeting background, Zoom background, Microsoft Teams, whatever you use that individuals can use so that they don't have to have their home in the background. Maybe it's even messy and they don't want to see it. We don't want to make people feel uncomfortable based on their home life. Another thing is being okay with having your camera off in a meeting. I feel like that's kind of an unspoken thing, is, you know, starting to get used to that a little more. A lot of people feel pressure with having their camera on, but that's something that we need to adjust and think about, why might individuals feel uncomfortable about that, and being okay with it. And again, just having a safe place for staff to come and talk to you as a manager, having your virtual door always open, and making sure that we're working with individuals. And so there are a lot of other things that we're trying to figure out, approaching implicit biases in the workplace virtually, and also understanding that, you know, a lot of individuals are going back to the office, but it's not looking like all the time, and it may be flexible and it changes. I mean, I work at MORPC, the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, and we're coming in 1 day a week to 3 days a week, depending on our vaccination status and our comfort. And that's really wonderful because it gives us the ability to do what we feel comfortable with. But there may be some staff who don't want to come in at all, and understanding maybe they have young children that they're worried about getting COVID-19. And we just want to be aware of how to make people feel comfortable so that we can maintain the benefits of high productivity and work-life balance. So it's been a learning experience, and we're looking forward to expanding on this guide that has already been so helpful. We are so glad it's been helpful, and that, Dave, you continue to share it with partners. I think that's incredible, and it really talks to the partnership that we had with you guys at GreenSpot and with Smart Columbus. So I would like to ask if maybe in the comments on Facebook, or if individuals would email me after, if there are any questions on telework, or maybe disparities with telework that they think we should look at and publish in our next document. That would be really, really helpful to us.
That's great, Lexi. And then what email address should folks email you?
Sure. My email is not an L. My full name's Alexandra. So Petrella, PETRELLA @morpc.org. So that's morpc.org.
Great, thanks, Lexi. And I mean, you touch on so many really important issues, and I think you know, when the pandemic hit, a lot of folks, started doing telework, but it was, you're right, people ran into different types of issues. And, you know, with the guide to kind of put out there of things to think about, even the things that you had mentioned about, you know, the background, or, you know, make people feel, let them know it's okay if you don't have your camera on all the time. I will say I bend to peer pressure. If I'm on a group call or something like that, and everybody has their camera on, I'm like, ooh, I better have my camera on, and vice versa. If nobody has their camera on, I'm not going to be the one that everybody's looking at. And so I'll cut my camera. Right. But it's certainly something where, if you're a facilitator, you can let folks know, either, you know, in the agenda document you send out, or during the beginning of the meeting. You know, we understand there's a lot of different situations out there and circumstances. So everything from, you know, computer issues to, you know, maybe you just don't want to share your camera today, you know, and that's okay. And putting that out there so folks know. You had mentioned, I wrote.
I'm so sorry, Dave. Please go. Well, I mean, I was just thinking to what you were just saying. Telework and working in the office, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. And, you know, in this guide that we worked on, we do talk about flexible telework policies. And I just saw in a Dispatch article from July that, you know, flexible telework is something that's becoming the norm, and that's something we should be okay with. But then maintaining that communication, having that door open, that's the key. It's making sure we understand that not every staff member, not every organization's the same, and meeting the needs of our staff to keep experiencing these benefits. It's really critical.
And it could even be you do a survey of your staff. Like I'm sure there's sample surveys out there of how does staff feel about teleworking? You know, what are things that you need to be aware of? And then not only surveying the staff, but you know, taking the data that you gather from that and putting it to use. So you do have a policy that works for your organization. I just wanted to point out and kind of repeat it. Hopefully I got this right, but 77% of the transportation emissions are from single occupancy vehicles.
I don't know if it's specifically single occupancy. I just know it's passenger vehicle transportation.
Passenger vehicle.
But
Okay.
I'm sure we could look it up, maybe even as Matt gives, you know, shares the different telework programs that he's aware of. I'm interested to see how much of that personal vehicle transportation is represented with single occupancy travel. So that's a fancy way to say one person in the car, which is not great for sustainability. So maybe while Matt's sharing his information later on, I'll look that up and put it in the chat for you to share, Dave.
That's great. And before we jump to Matt, I did want to say, I don't know how many people during the pandemic that were able to work, you know, from home, that they actually, you know, with their car, with its regular serviced oil change, went past the date instead of the mileage. Usually for me, you know, when I get my car serviced for an oil change, it's the actual mileage that I've surpassed, not the date they give you. Last year was the exception. And so I've tried to be a little bit better this year, because we are coming back into the office, to take the bike, like in the mornings when I can, I'll take Coda, and then I also ride my bike. So I do the bike and bus, which is kind of cool. I passed the new Crew Stadium, so it's always kind of exciting to see that. And then my ride home, I usually just ride home, which is about 6-7 miles. But I have that luxury to be able to do that, and not everybody does. So how do we make it so, like you mentioned with the equity component, how do we make it equitable so something works for everybody with that? I do want to bring in our next, I should say, Lexi, do you have any, though you'll have another opportunity, but do you have any words of wisdom before we switch over to Matt?
You know, I might think of something else while Matt's sharing, but I am really excited to hear him speak, because I know he is aware of different programs. I shared a little bit about MORPSES, and I think it is really cool to be aware of how other organizations are approaching this, and understand how my organization might adjust also, and might learn from what others are doing. So I might think of something later, but thanks so much, Dave. I'm excited to hear Matt.
Awesome. Well, with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we have Matt Griffin with Ohio State University. He's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the policies they have there, and the flexibility and all that good stuff. So Matt, I'll open up the floor, and it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you, Dave and Lexi. Lexi, really great resource that you shared there with that MORPSE guide. That's something that we've utilized at Ohio State, and I definitely encourage everyone watching this video to go check out that resource and familiarize yourself with it. Lots of great information in there. So as mentioned, I work for Ohio State, and Ohio State's interesting because we've adopted a fairly wide range of telework policies at our institution. And so anyone familiar with Ohio State knows that we're a very large workplace. We have a lot of employees, and we have a lot of employees serving different functions. So what Ohio State ended up doing is, at the as the pandemic was reaching a decline this summer, and since then there's been an uptick in cases, but during the summer, during the decline, there was an interest in reevaluating our remote work policies after our virtual work mandatory implementation at the start of the pandemic. And so Ohio State has always had, as Lexi pointed out, it's not something new, but we've always had a telework policy and a flexible work policy that was available to employees. But as we were approaching this hybrid work environment, there was an interest in reevaluating that. So a group was convened to evaluate that based on a number of factors. And what they decided is basically this is very complicated and we're going to let individual units decide. So I think, as Lexi and Dave pointed out, there's a lot of factors that need to be considered. And I think one thing that was discovered during those committees kind of meetings trying to decide how this new telework policy might be shaped is it's difficult to create a one size fits all solution. And so what we did is we ended up having a focus on function and unit. So each unit was allowed to create their own guidelines and own expectations underneath this fairly broad, fairly vague expectation set by the university. And the expectation was that everyone in that unit would be able to examine the function of their role and decide how much of it necessitated an in-person, presence on campus. So some positions, like our hall directors working in student life, they've been there pretty much full time since the start of the pandemic. So their role involves a lot of in-person interaction with students and other people who visit our campus. And so there's simply no telework option that works very well for them. But other people, like those working in our financial area, they have a lot more flexibility in their role. And so there's nothing that they do that necessitates necessarily them being on campus. And so they're allowed to have a lot more flexibility in their role. So that's one thing that was really beneficial for us, is kind of really looking at each individual role and deciding what needs to happen for this role to be able to be completed in a highly productive manner. And so that helps provide some clarity onto what kind of telework options might be available for employees in those roles. One thing that did, some pain points that did emerge through this process, though, is that there was a lack of clarity on who exactly is making the decision. Is it your direct supervisor? Is it their direct supervisor? Kind of how far up the chain do you need to go to get an answer on how flexible can you be in your role? So, something we saw with more successful units who adopted telework policies is that they really kind of clarified who was in charge of what responsibility-wise, and also how you can communicate, any concerns that you have, or any reason that you might be requiring an exception to what are the commonly stated rules for everybody. They also kind of clarified, what qualifies as an expectation. Do familiar responsibilities qualify as an expectation? Medical, almost always qualifies as an exception. So there's a lot of clarity that can be provided to employees regarding who do you talk to about the decision-making process, and also how your individual circumstance fits within those rules that are being set. So clarity is always extremely helpful. Just clarify, who's in charge of what and how you can get in touch with those people. Another thing that really we learned as we were transitioning back to our campuses is that we were not working in the offices the same ways as we were before the pandemic. So we still have masking guidelines set in place. Now we have a vaccine mandate. And also, meetings are still different. So now we have a lot more virtual meetings mixed with in-person meetings. And so even returning to campus did not look the same as when we left, a year and a half ago. And so we needed to really clarify, what does it look like to work in the office again? Do we still have the same clothing expectations as far as like what business casual means in our office? Do we have expectations on what time people should be in the office, or is there some flexibility there? Can people start their day teleworking and then transition into the office, maybe after rush hour has died down? Can people stay later and shift their hours back a little bit if that would be their preference? So there was a lot of kind of figuring out what it looks like to return to the office setting, even if people were coming back full time. So really every, manner of work has changed, not just those people who are continuing to work remotely, even us who are returning to the office. We're noticing a change in the way we work with our institution. So some common pain points there I'll further elaborate on is mixing virtual and in-person work. How do you work with a team where half of you are in the office, half are tuning in virtually? How do you make sure everyone's staying in touch with each other, communicating effectively? And so it's really important to set up, clean communication methods. So email, we found, was often not sufficient to help teams communicate effectively with each other, but luckily there's a host of other applications that are available. So things like Microsoft Teams that have a messaging feature, Skype has a messaging feature, Slack is another thing that a lot of teams use. So it's definitely really beneficial to look at these online productivity tools that exist and try to figure out, okay, what's going to help our team communicate very quickly with each other, because oftentimes email is not as sufficient. Setting expectations was really important. So again, not just for the people who are working remotely, but also those who are coming into the office. What kind of expectations are we setting regarding their hours and how they're expected to communicate with people who are working remotely? So again, setting very clear expectations was vital for teams to be successful. And then also, what resources are available for people working from home? Ohio State has always tried to be pretty accommodating towards people who are working on campus, but a lot of those same resources were not available when people were working from home. So now we're trying to decide what kind of tech will we supply people who are working from home. What will we be helping people develop ergonomic spaces if they're deciding to work from home full time? So a lot of those questions exist and are still trying to be figured out. So, as much as possible, I 100% advocate for people working from home having access to the same resources and same support as those working from the office, but I understand there can be some additional difficulties there in actually making that happen. So some common benefits, though, is that it increases the talent pool. So as Lexi pointed out, flexibility is becoming expected, and it's a bit of a commodity now. So people are looking for flexibility in their roles when they're deciding where to work. And frankly, Ohio State has not been as flexible as some institutions, and we're seeing a lot of, loss as far as employees go, with people deciding that, if they can do a similar job at another university, even if it's for slightly lower pay, the added flexibility is a huge benefit to them. And so that may be something they're willing to trade off for. So flexibility is really key and can be extremely beneficial for retaining a high talent workforce. And then another obvious benefit is protecting health. As Lexi pointed out, there's some people with small children who are still very vulnerable. There's people, who can't have access to vaccines for a variety of medical reasons. So there's a lot of reasons why someone may not feel comfortable or safe returning to the office. So while we're still in the midst of these very difficult times, adopting a telework policy has tremendous benefits for protecting the health of employees. And when we're looking at Ohio State, where we have a lot of different populations mixing, young students, older staff and faculty, it's really important that we try to figure out what's going to work best for each individual and really try our best to accommodate people if they need some kind of health exemption. So that's just what I wanted to share about what Ohio State's doing. Happy to share more, individual pieces or anecdotal stories. But definitely I myself am on campus pretty frequently, but I still work like 1 or 2 days from home. And so it's been really interesting for me to kind of mix this different ways of working and try to make my work week as seamless as possible, whether I'm in the office or whether I'm whether I'm back at home. So still definitely a learning process for many of us, but 100% checking out Lexi's guide. It's been a huge benefit to us, and I know it'll be a great resource for many others.
That's great. Lexi, looks like you want to chime in?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts. I mean, Matt really just expanded on so many things that I didn't even think about. First, the flexibility, talking about the, potential loss that OSU is experiencing, that's huge. And I have to say, MORPC has been so accommodating. I mean, Dave, you read in my bio how I'm pursuing my master's in public administration. Hopefully I'll be done in December. But that alone has been super challenging this semester, specifically with my work-life balance. And, my leadership has been so flexible, allowing me to work from home on days where I have class in the mornings and the evenings. And I can't say how appreciative I am to have leadership that's willing to work with my schedule based on that. And I know they're open to our other staff members who have small children or taking care of their parents and things like that. So it is so important for many reasons. But then also going back to making sure that your staff have the resources that they need right off the bat to work from home. That's so huge. At the beginning of our work from home, our leadership allowed us to take home a monitor so that we'd have a monitor in addition to our laptops, which that was key. I can't live without having a second monitor, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. And then as we're transitioning to have certain days in the office, we have 2 monitors in the office. So have that investment of making sure that we're comfortable working no matter where we are, it's super key. And referencing that in our actual telework guide. So in the sample policy that we include, there is a section on home workspace. We include that staff must designate workspace at home. And that's not something that you have to have. I transition from my desk to my couch to my island, just depending on where I want to sit at that particular moment. But having at least one place where you feel comfortable working, that's something you should probably include. And also having the understanding that the organization will provide equipment and technology to make telework possible. So that's why we have a sample policy. Things like that that say this is what the organization's contributing and this is what the staff member is contributing is really huge. And understanding where that responsibility lies. And then there is also a section for requesting evaluation on the policy and on the staff members' work and on the management's communication, making sure that, you know, everyone has a part to play in making this successful. In the sample telework agreement, we have these different items outlined that the employee agrees to remote work in a safe location, that they agree to secure all work-related materials, documents, and technology equipment provided, that the organization, employer, or IT group will provide maintenance on equipment as needed, just as like it would be in the office. And that the leadership retains the right to modify agreements and engage with the staff member as needed. And when we have the section where there are signatures for the agreements, we have an employee signature, a direct supervisor or manager section, department head, and HR signature. And we modeled it this way because that's how MORPSI is. We have supervisors, we have department heads, and so on. So that's what made sense for us. But something like that would help with what Matt said and understanding who do you report to? Who do you talk to when you have a problem? And it made it really easy for us to know if I have an IT issue with, you know, my monitor that's at home or my laptop that's at home, I go to IT just like I would as if I'm in the office. I put a ticket in the same way. If I have, you know, if that particular week is really weird for me and my schedule is going to be a little different, I might have to make up an hour on the weekend or something. I go to my department head or my supervisor. I'm sorry, my supervisor. And then it's just, you know, everyone knows where to go. It's organized. People feel comfortable. But again, having that door open, making sure that if someone's, you know, feeling uncomfortable with their particular schedule, that there's room for change. And yeah, and again, you know, what Matt said about how it's different now, you know, the hybrid format that individuals may have now is different. So wearing a mask, and I know we have days where unvaccinated individuals, whether, you know, they have, you know, medical reasons for not getting vaccinated or not, they can feel comfortable coming in 2 days a week, and vaccinated individuals can come in other days a week. But either way, there's flexibility. People feel comfortable. We have masks on all the time. And we're working on having technology that makes it so we can continue with virtual meetings. Something that's so huge with MORPSI is that we bring people together. We bring our region together. So we're able to still have those meetings virtually and in hybrid. So if some people want to come in, we make sure that they feel safe to do so, but they have that option of joining virtually. So it is a learning experience, but you know, these items like having a sample policy and an employee agreement, these things can help make it the journey a little easier.
Absolutely. And you all, I mean, have touched on so many different things. It's great. You know, one thing I was kind of taking notes here real quick when both of you all were talking. One thing that I really liked, and I think, Matt, you had said this, that the different departments, divisions are responsible for their own policies. I imagine they're talking to one another. So they're comparing their policy to each other to see if somebody else maybe have a better idea, right? And so that way you're replicating success. And then looking back at that policy and having, see if it's working, right? So just don't do a policy and then, okay, we're done with this. We can check it off the list and we never revisit it. Maybe revisit it, you know, 6 months later or a year later. Be open to feedback from those employees who are able to telework. And I remember hearing at the beginning of the pandemic that there was a shortage of office chairs because a lot of people were working from home and they didn't have office chairs. And I must say, I was one of them. We had this old rickety 1980s kitchen chair that I was using. Luckily, by the time I got fed up with that, I was able to get a real chair and they were back in stock. But things like that, yeah, like what space are you able to have, even if it's putting up a card table, right? Even if it is, Lexi, I think you had mentioned like on the kitchen island, you know, or kitchen table, making it so it is more equitable than saying, okay, you need to have a specific office at home set up where a lot of people just don't have the space for that. And the other benefit that I think you all touched on is just the quick emissions reduction that you can get from a telework policy. And this is something that businesses can put into, like our GreenSpot business members. They can put that into their annual reports. If a business does an annual report on their business, right, that's something they could include. They've reduced X amount of tons of CO2 by allowing employees to work from home, reduced miles traveled by employees by, hundreds or thousands of miles. Even though we have to come back into the office here, one thing that's nice is that we do a lot of Zoom and WebEx and Microsoft Teams and the other ones that I can't think of now for meetings. And so I'm not having to walk 5 minutes, to my car and then drive somewhere. And, we work on sustainability. I'm driving, I'm polluting, right? And I don't have the electric vehicle. So there's things like that are real benefit for doing the telework thing. Also, one thing that maybe a business can do is having, when they're looking into what platform to use, right? I think we've all experienced that, oh, it's on Microsoft, oh, it's on WebEx, oh, it's on Zoom. I don't know how to do X, Y, and Z. That you train your employees on whatever platform that you use on the ins and outs. And sometimes that might be bringing in a consultant from the outside who has experience with those webinar platforms. So we are just about out of time. If there are any questions, write them in the chat, or if you're on Facebook, watching us on Facebook, I'm watching us on Facebook as well. You can type them in there and I will see the questions or comments. We have about a minute left. While we're waiting for any questions to come in, I want to see if you all have any last words of wisdom for employees or employers who are looking possibly to do a telework policy. Lexi, what's your words of wisdom?
First is just obviously communication. It's huge. Look for equity even when you think you don't need to. That's something we learned after the completion of our first guide. And also, telework is not necessarily telecommuting. So when you're working from home and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I'd like to work, not in my home right now, try to find somewhere you can walk to or bike to or take transit to. Because if you're driving to another destination, guess what? We're losing that sustainability impact. So I learned that from a good friend in Denver. His name's Jerry, and from their MPO. So it's definitely something to remember. And always reach out to me at Warpsy if you have questions or if there's anything else you'd like to see in a future document.
Great, thanks, Lexi. Matt, do you have any last words of wisdom here?
Yeah, I would echo everything Lexi said, and I might just add quickly that just because you have to work with someone differently because they're teleworking doesn't mean they're not performing their job just as well as someone coming into the office full time. So I think we just need to embrace that we're all going to have to be a bit more flexible on how we work as a team, and we may have to change the way we work with one team member as compared to another, but there's many ways people can be highly productive and highly skilled at their jobs. It might just look a little bit different for each person, depending on whatever their situation may be. So we're all going to have a lot of adjusting still to do in the future, but I'm really excited to see how, not just the environmental benefits, but, also the health and the mental health benefits of us being more flexible and embracing, a slightly different style of working.
Excellent. You all both make excellent points. I have the last word, but there's not really last words of wisdom coming from me. So I do want to thank both Matt and Lexi for taking the time out of their day for this webinar. I want to thank folks who are watching us live and for those who are watching us maybe on the recorded version. So we are recording this and it will be up on our City of Columbus's YouTube page, as well as the Columbus GreenSpot webpage. And we'll also promote it on our social media when it is ready to be viewed. So with that, I want to thank everybody and stay tuned in for our next GreenSpot conversations, which will be coming up at some point soon. We don't have a date yet, but we are getting closer and closer. So thanks everybody, and we are going to say enjoy the rest of your week.